Protests erupting in Greenland this weekend after President Trump announced new tariffs on 8 NATO allies opposing his plans to acquire the territory. That move sparking bipartisan reaction.
Greenland and the Danes have been our allies for a long time now. The president is the consummate deal maker, and I think he's looking for a deal.
Denmark, Greenland, the Kingdom of Denmark, that's our ally. It's our friend. So I'm puzzled by the president's threat of tariffs.
For more, let's bring in National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. Great to see you this morning. I want to start here. You know, the president's tariff threat to these 8 NATO allies does appear to be potentially upending one of his signature achievements, the landmark trade deal with the EU that he struck in July. Listen here.
This is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade. I think it's the biggest deal ever made.
We have a deal. We have a trade deal between the 2 largest economies in the world. And it's a big deal. It's a huge deal.
So this deal has been partially implemented, but it still hasn't cleared the European Parliament. Several members now are calling for 0% tariffs on U.S. products to be put on hold. And that deal also included $750 billion in energy purchases from the U.S., a $600 billion investment in the U.S., military purchases. Is all of that scrapped now that the president appears to be putting an overarching tariff over the deal that he made?
Right. Well, first of all, I want to say that throughout the negotiations with the Europeans last year, you would have heard them say, oh, if we have a tariff, if we do what President Trump says, it'll be terrible for our economies, you'll tank our economies. And if you go back and look that as we've negotiated these great deals both for the U.S. and for Europe, then their economies have boomed, their stock markets have boomed. It's been amongst the better years ever for them because basically they see that the U.S. right now is once again the shining city on the hill, that we're the engine of global growth, and President Trump has accomplished that really in just 1 year. So I think right now, with respect to Greenland, the president has a strong view that it's a national security matter for the U.S. to have more control over Greenland, and I'm confident that in the end he's going to go negotiate a deal that's great for us and great for our partners.
So do these tariffs stack on top of the existing tariffs? And moreover, is he using IEEPA for that? Because the Supreme Court could make a ruling on that and potentially strike it down as early as this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've not been briefed on the legalities of the Greenland tariffs yet. That'll happen for me tomorrow morning. Sorry.
Okay. The president obviously often escalates to de-escalate when he is deal making, but Europe is pretty outraged over this. These 8 states deployed their militaries as a symbolic defense against a NATO ally. The French president seemed to compare the U.S. to Russia even, saying, quote, no intimidation nor threat will influence us, neither in Ukraine nor in Greenland. A Danish member of the European Parliament called this economic warfare and called to sanction, quote, Trump's oligarchs. If the EU sanctions American firms like banks or tech firms, Microsoft, Google, X, what kind of an impact could that have on the U.S. economy?
The one thing I've learned, Jackie, is that when you are engaged in negotiation with any country and with President Trump, that you'll see both sides take very strong, extreme positions. But in the end, the president is the person who wrote the art of the deal because he's so good at deal making. And so I think right now it's really a good time for cooler heads to prevail and for us to disregard the rhetoric and get to the table and see if there can't be a deal that's worked out that's best for everybody.
Okay. This week, the president appeared to take you out of the running for Fed chair. Here's what he said.
I see Kevin's in the audience, and I just want to thank you. You were fantastic on television today. I actually want to keep you where you are, if you want to know the truth. Kevin Hassett is so good. You don't want to lose him, Susie.
Are you still in the mix for Fed chair?
First, I got to say, it was like really, I was so humbled and gratified by what the president had to say about me. He is such a good guy and so gracious towards his staff. From the beginning, he and I have talked about whether it's better for me to be here in the West Wing or over at the Fed. I don't think he's made a final call on that. But I got to say that I'm even humbled still, perhaps, to be in the running with the other people like Rick Reeder, who is the person that manages like $3 trillion in debt. He's one of the biggest bond market guys in the world. Kevin Warsh, who's been at the Fed before. Chris Waller, who's at the Fed now. There are a lot of great candidates, and it could well be that the president's right to make the decision decision that this is the best place for me right now. We've got so much to do in this White House. And I would add that you saw how much we accomplished last year. Everybody talks about how it's a historic year of record accomplishment. And that can't happen if you don't have a blockbuster White House staff. And I'm not talking about me and Susie. I'm talking about people like Robin Colwell and Paige Willey and Cale Klingenpeel, the people at the National Economic Council that come in every day and make sure that the trains are running on time. And so I'm very grateful that we built a great team that could accomplish so many great things last year. And if I stay here, I promise you we'll do that again for this year as well.
One more question on Fed Chair, because I do want to get to Davos. But the Senate, a couple of Senate Republicans said this week that they would not confirm any nominee until the investigation into Jerome Powell is over. Tom Tillis said, quote, "I wouldn't consider my mother for the post under the current conditions because we've got to resolve this matter." Does this probe make it hard for any successor to Powell that the president chooses, especially someone who's got a close relationship with him, to be seen as independent? And should Puro pull the probe?
Well, I have great respect for the senators who voice their opinions about this. I think the bottom line is, more than anything, that it puts pressure on the Justice Department to sew this up pretty quickly so that we can see. I know that there's been some frustration about transparency of the cost overruns, and let's hope that all that gets cleared up quickly.
Okay. Now, you are about to head to Davos with the president.
Sure.
He is leading the largest U.S. delegation to the World Economic Forum in history. You teased an announcement Friday that would allow Americans to tap their 401k for down payments while putting equity from that house into their 401k as an asset so that they're not sort of behind on their retirement planning. Tell us about this plan. How soon could we see that happen, and what other announcements might come out in Davos?
Well, that was a sketch of one of the 4 or 5 ideas about how to let people have access to their 401ks. And so the president hasn't made a final decision, but he's absolutely confident that one of the reasons why that homeownership is so down, especially for people in the sort of 30 to 40 range, is that the down payment for the typical home has gone from about $17,000 to $35,000 because of Joe Biden's inflation. And so people who do have, especially if they've got an employer who's been matching 3% of their contribution to the 401k, do have some money in their 401k right now. If they take the money out, that it gets taxed, so that then you're sort of cutting it in half, and then there's a penalty as well. President Trump thinks that if we can get it out without these heavy tax penalties, then we can free up cash for people to buy homes. And I think that that's a key part. It's going to be a key part, however it turns out in the end, in terms of the technical details of his home building agenda this year.
Yeah. Times are kind of tough. There was a study this week that showed 37% of people had taken out a loan or early withdrawal or hardship from retirement funds at some point. They called this pretty concerning. So that would be a good thing for people who are trying to make sure that they keep their retirement on track while they try to buy a house. But one other question about this proposal, or the slate of proposals, would that require new legislation to rewrite the tax code? And how likely is it that something like that passes with these margins in Congress?
Right. Well, the general idea that President Trump put forward on helping people have access to the cash that's theirs without heavy tax penalties has been something that we've been socializing in the Senate and the House, and we've received really great enthusiasm for the idea. And so our expectation is that we will attempt to move forward with legislation this year on this matter, and that it might even, it could actually even be bipartisan, because it's such a no-brainer for Americans to have access to their money so that they can finally be homeowners.
If you can get Congress to do anything these days, that's a pretty big achievement.
No kidding.
We will look forward to your trip to Davos and all of the announcements coming with it. Kevin Hassett, Director of the National Economic Council, thank you so much for joining Sunday Briefing, sir.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.